i direttori spirituali di Ananda worldwide. Now, Swami Jyotish has been with Swami Kriyananda even before the beginning of Ananda, I think in 1968. And he started helping then, at that moment, Swami Kriyananda to develop what is now Ananda worldwide. And his wife Devi joined soon. They are both parents and grandparents. They know everything about integrating the spiritual teachings in many different aspects of life, including parenting and grandparenting. And they specialize, you might say, in spiritual friendship, giving spiritual friendship to everyone in the world, and in sharing the teachings in an endearing way, inspiring, that is at the same time deep and also light. It is serious, but it's also fun. So we are very grateful always when they come. This time they cannot be here physically, but they're with us online. And I think everyone in Europe is grateful and happy to have you. So I'll leave it to you now, and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. Oh, it's so nice for us to see all of the faces of so many friends. We wish we could be there, but obviously the circumstances don't allow that.
And I too just want to greet you. We have a beautiful theme for this morning, Hope for a Better World. And then we'll speak, each of us will speak briefly, 10, 15 minutes, and then we'll open it up for questions from all of you. And it's really thrilling for us to be able to see old friends, new friends, people from many different countries. What we're doing right now is the best hope for a better world. So let's join and begin with a prayer.
I'll just say the prayer, follow along mentally, otherwise it gets confusing. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, great masters, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, beloved Guru, Paramahansa Yoganandaji, saints of all religions, we humbly bow to you all. Beloved Lord, bless us that we stay completely in tune with thee and are able to do thy will and help many people. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Okay, well, we'll launch right in because even though we have some time today, it's not a long time to cover such a large topic as the road ahead and hope for a better world. Let me start just very briefly that the whole planet is subject to mass karma. And in this case, we're subject to the mass karma of the movement of, one might say, planetary forces that are bringing us. I'm going to focus just on each of us as we speak. Those planetary forces that are bringing us toward a higher mass consciousness, but we're far from there yet. The lowest point of mass consciousness was around 500 AD. And since that time, it has been improving, but from 500 AD to now is about 1400 years. And if we think of a lifetime, the whole Yuga cycle is 24,000 years, so 12,000 years of ascending consciousness. So if we think of the percentage of 1,400 years into 12,000, it's, I don't know, about 10 or 11%. So think about a person who is destined to live 100 years, we're only 11 or 12 years old. And so being a young teenager like that, the mass consciousness is not very high. Unfortunately, we have been given some powerful weapons and toys to play with, and we're not using them very well at this current time. But because the movement of consciousness is ascending, things are destined to get better. And so things will continue to improve, but they don't improve in a straight line. It's like climbing a mountain. You go up for a little while and then you have to descend, and then you begin to go up again and you descend and so on. And right now, very currently, we are in one of those descending times in an upward overall direction. When we look around the world today, we're seeing increasing tension, increasing problems from pandemic, but other things too. And because all of that is increasing, that shows the difficulties are increasing. It shows that things are kind of just temporarily moving down, but they will start ascending, and they have been ascending. If you really look at history, the world is much, much better off now than it was 1,000 years ago. Standard of living is better, communication, I don't want to go into all of it because it's just very obvious. But the world is in an ascending overall period, but a descending or turbulent temporary period. Now, how long that means temporary, we don't know. It could go on for, it's already been very difficult the last 2 years, one might say. It could be very turbulent. And in fact, I think it will be very turbulent for many years ahead. I think we should expect the road ahead is going to be filled with bumps for at least several years and maybe longer into the future. But that's the mass karma of what is happening. You and I don't have to be completely controlled by the mass karma. We have the ability to do something different. A good illustration of this is we may be outside and it starts raining, and so everything is getting wet because of the rain. But you and I have the ability, if we choose, to open an umbrella and hold it over our head so that even though everyone around us may be getting wet, we don't have to get wet. Well, that umbrella is our teachings, our connection to this high line of masters. And so that mass karma we have to be subject to it to a certain extent, but it does not have to affect us in a very deep and personal way. Another way of thinking about this is that right now, there are very, very stormy seas around us. And those storms are going to continue for a while. And I'll come back to that. But Ananda itself is not like a little tiny boat being tossed by those stormy seas. Because we have the solidity of our teachings, we have the solidity of community of satsang, and we have the protection of our masters. We aren't like a little ship sailing through those stormy seas. We're like an island. And being on an island, yes, there's storms around us, but we have to serve as a safety area for those who are our subject and those who want to direct their ships toward us. We have to be open to helping other people. If we don't do that, we will lose our protection of the great masters, because we are simply really working as much as possible to be extensions of the masters. I was just reading this morning. I read at the end of meditation, I read um, one of the prayer demands from Master, from Whispers from Eternity, the book. That just this morning I read one that he's repeated so often. I will reason, I will, I will act, but guide thou my reason, will, and activity to the right path in everything. And so we have to um, act in this life. We find ourselves here, we can't avoid it. So we have to do the best we can, but our protection is to tune in to that higher consciousness. Started out talking about the yugas and how we're just a little over 11% or so into this upward period. Well, the masters are at the very top. In fact, they're out of it, but think of them as the highest consciousness. So if we tune into them instead of the mass consciousness around us, then our actions and our consciousness will be directed by their consciousness, not by politicians, not by economists, not by doctors, not by anything outside of ourselves, but by them. So, what is the road ahead? What can we expect? Well, Master and Swami, Master said that there would be some very difficult times ahead. Dwapara Yuga seems to be, on some levels, a kind of an advanced stage. You look around, we have all of these electronics and so on. So it seems like it's an advanced stage, but the consciousness is, as I said, of a young, not even yet a teenager, uh, using all those tools and techniques. So because of our particular kind of delusions, we are drawing to us mass karma, not to punish us, but to help us learn. And so if we look at some of the great difficulties that we have, let's take climate change. Why is there climate change going on? Because we as a mass consciousness are insensitive to the nature around us. And so we have to learn to be more sensitive. There are economic difficulties coming. Why do those economic difficulties come? Because the mass consciousness is economically greedy, and we don't care enough about other people. We don't share. We want to take to ourselves. And so the economic turbulence is drawn by the mass consciousness. And why the pandemic? Master said that the flu that came 100 years ago in 1918 was caused by the negative thoughts of mankind that came up during World War I. And those negative thoughts attracted to the world a pandemic at that time. Well, do we have negative thoughts in mass consciousness now? Of course we do. And that negativity has attracted to us this current pandemic. So everything that we're facing is meant to help mankind as a whole raise our consciousness and get more in tune with the positive universal forces. But as I say, you and I individually do not need to be as controlled by that mass consciousness. We have to live through it, yes, but we don't have to have it control our lives. And the more we act and think and meditate and care about others act and think and care about others, the more we act in positive directions and in tune with the will of God, the more protected we will be. And the more we connect to our line of gurus, because that's our line. Others connecting to their line will also receive the protection of their line. It's not exclusive, it's all God. But we, being followers of this particular lineage, we need to attune ourselves to our lineage. And as we do that, we will be, they will form that umbrella of protection over us. The final thing that I would like to say is that in part, the reason that we will be protected is that all of the masters have great compassion. They don't want to see mankind punished, but they do want to see mankind learn. But they know that this is a difficult time. They know that people are suffering. They have great compassion for that. And our job, our responsibility is to be a channel to help others, a channel for them to be able to help others during these difficult times. And if we do that, we will be acting and thinking and willing and feeling according to the directions of God and the masters. And when we do that, we will be a great help to the world around us. And we will also find that the primary benefit for us individually will be a great acceleration of our own consciousness. And so difficult though these times are for devotees such as us, they really are the very best opportunity for spiritual growth that we will ever see in our lifetime. And so let's take advantage of that and work to be a channel of the great masters and help the world through this difficult time. And now Devi will talk and then we'll answer questions.
Hello, everyone. It really is such a joy to see friends from many different places, Russia, Germany, Thailand, Bulgaria, of course, all over Italy, friends visiting from Israel and America and so forth. So thank you for joining us. Master said that when he came to the West in 1920, he said, if I had come earlier, before the suffering of World War I, people would not have been so receptive. They had to have gone through that to look for hope, to look for meaning, to look for higher purpose in life. And so our discussion today with you, Hope for a Better World, as I'm sure you know, Swami has written a beautiful book with that title, but it's really a lifeline for us to move forward through difficult times, because there is much hope. And as Jyotish was talking about the transition from Kali Yuga to Dwapara Yuga, as we know, Kali Yuga is a time of where things are seen in terms of fixed form, defined separation between religions and people and cultures. And now we move into Dwapara. So it's a time of change. People don't handle change generally very well. And I think the social, political, economic problems and the pandemic as an offshoot of that are in large part because people are afraid of change. They're afraid of the consciousness of Dwapara Yuga, which is one that doesn't see form, but it sees things in terms of energy, not things in terms of fixity, but of fluidity, not in terms of separation and division, but of unity and wholeness. And so what I would like to share briefly with you all, and then we'll take questions, is what are some attitudes that we can really live with to bring about a better world? And these are things that Master and Swami talked about often, but in this context, I think it gives us a very clear picture of how we can be channels for light in the world today. The first attitude is one of simplicity. Master spoke often of plain living and high thinking. So the more we can get rid of clutter in our lives, our dependence on outward things. I'm going to need this to be happy. If I don't have the fastest, newest computer, how can I possibly be happy, etc., etc. You know, we had a very good instructive lesson with this in 1976 when the forest fire came and struck Ananda village and burnt it to the ground. And as Darshan was saying, we have a child. And at that time that he was a newborn baby, 11 days old. And we lost every single thing we owned. All that we were able to get out of the house, literally, was a box of sacred things from the altar. And that was God's grace. But the blessing that came from that was I really went inside and I thought, where does my security and sense of well being come from? Not from any one of those things that I lost, but from my own sense of being centered within myself. So the more we can break our dependency on outward things and live simply, but with high thinking, the more we will help people to move into a way of living that has great freedom. Dependency on things is bondage. Freedom from things is freedom, or non-dependency is freedom. And so to remember, look at your life and think about, what am I dependent on? What do I think my happiness depends on? And just even mentally break the bondage with those things and try to live really in a spirit of divine simplicity. Now, another attitude is, and this again we learn from Master's teachings, is a sense of unity with all people, world brotherhood, no divisions, this political party and that political party, this religion and that, but a sense of unity and cooperation. I think cooperation is one of the keynotes of what Master brought and one of the real foundation stones for Dwapara Yuga. Not just thinking, what do I want? I am a separate entity and I have to think of my own needs and my own desires. But at Ananda Village over the years, we often use the phrase when we're at a meeting and there's some difference of opinion, we'll say, what is trying to happen here? In other words, what's God's will? Not my will, not your will, but what's the umbrella? What's the overarching? And the more we can do that, we can look at people from many different persuasions and cultural backgrounds and languages and religions, and we can just appreciate the diversity, but feel the unity in diversity. That was another one of Master's big tenets, was the underlying unity of all religion. Another point, an attitude for a better world, is strength, but flexibility. You know, you see pictures of these bodybuilders, be they a man or a woman, and they have these huge, massive muscles. But when you watch them walk, they look like robots. They're so stiff. But when you see a hatha yogi who has great strength, but there's fluidity and flexibility, and that's what we're going to need for the times ahead. Strength, but flexibility, because things may change. I mean, who knew the pandemic was coming? Who knew the retreat was going to be shut down? All of those things. You're fortunate in Assisi, you've been able to open your retreat. We're hoping we can open it later in the year here at Ananda Village, but we still are not at that point yet. But to be strong in yourself, and adaptable and flexible. These are very, very important qualities. And, you know, Swami Kriyananda was such a wonderful example of this, because we saw him, he was so creative and he initiated so many different projects, but he would be going full throttle, full blast in a certain direction. And then if it just, he always was asking, Master, is this what you want? Is this what you want? And even if he had the whole community moving in a direction, and this happened a number of times, if he inwardly felt this isn't what Master wants, boom, he would immediately shift and move in a different direction. So it's a very important quality to always be in cooperation with God's will, with your brothers and sisters, and then to be able to adapt. Don't, Swami wasn't afraid of looking foolish. Well, you had us all going in this direction. He said, yes, I did. It felt right at the time. It no longer feels right. So to work with that flexibility, very important. Then to get attitudes for a better world. Of course, Jyotish mentioned this as well, but faith, faith that God is in charge. Sometimes people will come to us here at Ananda Village. We're part of the leadership, and they'll say, why are you letting this happen? Or why are you letting that happen? And we keep our eyes on things very closely, but we also want to be open to God's will. And if someone's being very disruptive in the community and very causing a lot of waves and so forth, and sometimes people come and they say, well, why don't you ask that person to leave? And that's not how we work. We said, this is Master's work. There's no one who comes to our community that doesn't have that karma to be here. And when we watch, we don't let them create a huge problem. But when they're no longer meant to be here, God will take them away. And it's so true. I'm going to digress a little bit and tell a story. I'll keep it brief because I don't want to go on too long. But there was a direct disciple of Master called Dr. George, and he lived in Minneapolis. But Master thought very highly of him. He said, in fact, he was the third most advanced man after Rajarsi and Oliver Black. But he was an eccentric. And during the Depression, he built a very ramshackle house in Minneapolis because he wanted to allow many people to come. There were homeless people, and it was somehow he was totally not working with the building department or the planning department. It was just this rambling ramshackle house, but somehow he escaped through God's grace. No one evicted them. But one time he took in a family. It was a mother and father and two children, and they were they were just using the situation. They were not grateful, and they wanted more and this and that, and they weren't happy. And then finally the father said, I don't like being here, and I'm going to report you to the building department tomorrow, and you're all going to get evicted. And some of Dr. George's disciples came and said, well, Master or Guruji, what are you going to do? We can't let them evict him. He said, don't worry, God will take charge of it. And in the middle of the night, this man and his family just left. They just departed. And they went in there in the morning and they discovered this, but the whole room was filled, ceiling to floor, walls with cockroaches. I'm not sure what the Italian or Russian or German word for cockroach is, but I'm sure there is one. And they called in the exterminator to get rid of them. And the exterminator said, this is very strange. These are not American cockroaches. I've never seen these in America. These are Indian cockroaches or Asian cockroaches that have come into this house. So Master got rid of those people. So to just have faith that God's in charge. We don't have to be unkind to people. We don't have to defend ourselves or push them away. But God will do what's right. And then finally, and then we want you to ask questions. I found a beautiful passage, as Jyotish was saying, we read from Whispers from Eternity every day, every morning. And this was one I found a few days ago. And so this is the last attitude I want to share with you for a better world. This is demand for balance. O Spirit, teach me to pray and worship incessantly with deepest concentration. O Spirit, balance my meditation with devotion and purify my devotion with all surrendering love unto thee. So this is a beautiful way that we can have develop all these other attitudes. Be sure you're strong in your sadhana, your daily meditation, no matter what happens. Don't give that up. But then don't think just by being a spiritual technocrat, that's enough. It's not only about techniques. You have to balance it with devotion and love for God and Guru. And then that too, there's a final step that Master talked about, because devotion can still be coming from an I and thou relationship. I, Arjuna, love thee, Master, and beyond just devotion is surrender and self-offering, where the individual soul is no longer separate from the object of devotion, where we are no longer separate from God and Guru. So to move along in that way, in such a way that we can really feel that meditation, concentration, devotion, and self-offering, these are the qualities of a citizen of High Dwapara Yuga. And these are the qualities that we need, the right practices and attitudes we need to bring hope and help create a better world. So now Jyotish and I will come on, and we will ask you or invite you to ask some
Poi di fare
questions.
domande.
Thank you, Jyotish and Devi. And I'll say this.
Grazie, Jyotish and Devi.
So I'll have to turn off the, the Italian translator for a moment because we are both on the same account. So I'll say it in both languages. But so now, if anyone has a question, you can ask. And there's maybe while you think, there's one question that someone already wrote in the chat. And it's a question from someone from the community, and they write, in our chat, which he means the community chat on WhatsApp, often there's people who express their thoughts on the pandemic and others who think that we shouldn't talk about it too much. And what is your advice on how can we handle this topic when there's so many different opinions about it? So let me just...
Well, that's a very good question. First of all, there are different layers in there. Concentrating on something too much, in fact, draws the power of that, either good or negative. So by concentrating on God or on a form of God, we draw God to us. But by concentrating on fear or negativity, we also can draw that to us. So the laws of magnetism say that that which we put our minds to, our attention to, we open ourselves. So it is not healthy to talk too much about the pandemic, especially with negativity or fear or criticism, because, well, I'll just say this, that Satan, or the negative force, is intelligent and it wants to draw us into separation. That's the primary element of negativity, is to draw us into a consciousness of separation. I, my, me, mine, not them, and so on. And this problem with the pandemic has separated us physically, separated us in terms of harmony with each other. And so where there are differences of opinion, to constantly be arguing about that is just to get into the negativity that's already there with the pandemic. Yes, we have to know enough to act reasonably, but not much more than that. Perhaps we need to look at the news, but not 10 times a day, not over and over, just enough to know what's going on in the world. And then we primarily need to act together in a positive way. Finally, I'll come back to all of the, one might say, discord that comes up because of the pandemic, and it's worldwide. I know that you have it in your community. We have it in our community. Different ways of reacting to this, and sometimes those opinions are held quite strongly. I'll say this for it. The harmony between us is more important than any person's opinion. At Ananda Village, we have allowed people to make their own choices about whether they take the vaccine or don't take the vaccine. We don't argue endlessly about it. We just let them make their own choices. But then we also say that everybody must act in a way that is responsible and helpful to the welfare of others. And so I think you're making that same conclusion.
Yes, I'll add some thoughts here as well. Just to balance what Jyotish said, we have to be practical though, and you all have done that beautifully, we know in Assisi, and we've done it here too, getting advice from Dr. Peter Van Houten. I know he gave some satsangs there for all of you, so that we're not just going by opinions and articles that somebody who is not well informed is propounding as truth. We have to really look for truth now, and to then respond on a practical level. And you have done that. We have done that, and it's protected our community. So we don't need to talk about it endlessly, but we need to act in a practical, responsible way in response. A friend of ours yesterday told us a very delightful story, and I offered to you as a good tool you can use, that there are some divisions here at the village, people who are pro-vaccination and anti-vaccination. Although I must say, at this point, 85% of the community has been vaccinated. I just want you to know that. And there hasn't been any problem with anybody. And it's enabling us to begin to mix more and do more things without masks and so forth. But this woman, a friend of mine yesterday, told me this story. She was working in the garden with another woman who, and our friend had been vaccinated. This other woman was very vocal, anti-vaccination. And so this woman came up to her and said, "Which side of the fence are you on?" And our friend, with great wisdom, said, "I'm not on any side of the fence. My guru told me not to see divisions between people. I don't judge people by what decisions they've made or what choices they made in their life, or in my life. I try to see the underlying unity in everyone." And she said this woman was so taken aback because she kind of wanted to get into an argument, but it's a very good comment. Not to see which side of the fence are you on, but Master had no fences. We're all his children, and we make decisions according to our own highest wisdom. So just to share that. Altre domande?
Other questions?
Thank you, Jyotish and Devi. So, are there any questions here from the people in the temple?
Avete domande voi?
Don't be shy. Oh, okay. Well, Rashmi is asking, when are you going to come to Italy? Which is a good question.
Yes.
As soon as we can.
Yes, as soon as we can. We're looking very much toward what is possible as things open up more, as the disease lessens. And we're hoping that at this point, India is still has a lot of difficulty, a lot of pandemic happening there. So we're delaying our trip, but um, I think the best answer we can give is as soon as we possibly can. It might be late this year, but more likely early next year at the very latest, unless things are very, very different than what we expect. We will be there a year from now in our usual time. We come early August and spend at least a month in Italy. We love being there.
Yeah, and we miss you all, and thank you all for joining. We see so many dear beloved faces, and it means so much to us. So we're just trying to, because we're just trying to be safe. We're in this, we both have been vaccinated, and so that is some protection, but we're trying to be safe. But you know, I'll just, when Darshan introduced us, and Darshan is a dear friend from the beginning of Ananda in Italy, when we were located up in Veglio, and up in northern Italy. He introduced us and said that we're grandparents. And in fact, over the weekend, our grandchildren came and visited us. They live in nearby Nevada City. And so we were driving them back. And it was very curious because we saw a very unusual sight on the street corner. There was a family, homeless family, with a mother and father, and in fact, a handicapped daughter, and they were begging. And we said to our grandchildren, I looked in my purse and I had some money and gave it to each of them. And we said, go give this money to them. And then as we approached them, we looked and we saw it was an Indian family. And we said, are you from India? Because we live in rural California where there
Not very many.
No, I don't
Indian
know. I've ever
families.
seen an Indian family here. Anyway, they were in fact from India, and we had a very nice conversation. But the point I'm making here is for those of you who work with children, who have children or grandchildren, it's very important now to model service to others, helping others. And we were talking with our grandchildren, when Christmas time comes, rather than just buying presents for each other, let's get our money together and we'll buy presents for people in the homeless shelters. And they were all excited about that. So it's very important to model, not only for children, but for others now. We have been fortunate to be protected in our communities or by God and Guru, those of you who don't live in communities, but just to really think about not so much the pandemic and who's right and who's wrong and what's the science, but there are people suffering right now that is beyond dispute. People have lost their jobs. They have lost the person in the family that earns the living, and we need to help now.
Have sent a little greeting. We want to greet you, dear friends. You are so often in our hearts and our minds and our prayers. And um, there's a deep and sincere bond with you. And then Annapurna has asked to welcome and help everybody. But is there a possibility that a person or situation might come in order to help us practicing our discernment about consciously relating on a level that we feel is healthy for our soul? Yes, of course, there can be situations where a person is begging adharmically. There was a very clear situation of this when Swami used to live in Italy and come in the earlier years. There was a man there who was actually very highly educated. He had been a lawyer, and but he mentally was a little bit off. And he began begging on the street, and Swami told him that that wasn't good, and that he should get a job. And the man kind of laughed at Swami and said, why should I get a job? I can earn more by begging than I can by working. And Swami said, that's wrong behavior. And so there are people that will come and ask for help. What we constantly have to do is don't push the person away. Never push a person away. Never say you are this. Say rather that what your actions are now are not healthy for you. And I want to help you, but by helping what you're asking for may not be helping you. And so we do have to use discrimination. If someone is an alcoholic and asks us for money to buy alcohol, we should say no to that, that it's not good for you, but we shouldn't reject the person. And so we have to use discrimination, but 90% of the time, we have to use the open heart and kindness toward others, because yes, we'll have a few people who ask incorrectly, but most people are genuinely needing our help, and everybody needs our love and our friendship on a deeper level.
And I see there's a comment from Rosanna to everyone. Rosanna, are you our dear Rosanna Golia? I assume that's who you are. You know, she's in Italy now, and just dear sister, cara sorella, nostro preghieri sono con te adesso, sempre e sempre.
So, Jyotish and Devi, there's another question from Durga. How can we support families better in our community, both spiritually and practically?
Excellent question.
Yes.
Okay, I'll start. This is a question we're asking right now at the village as well, because it's having children and trying to be on the spiritual path, being a devotee is not easy. It's much more difficult than if you're just single or a couple without children, because your time is so little your own. Time to meditate, time to serve, time to participate in community activities. So we're actually putting a lot of thought into this right now at the village, and we're trying to create activity. Well, like for example, this Saturday night, Jyotish and I are going to have a satsang just for families. And first there'll be a big picnic dinner, and then someone will take the children, and we'll have a kirtan. Someone will take the children away for little guided, activities. And then we'll have a satsang with the parents, and then we'll all come back together for prayers at the end. One little example. But I think we need to really, I think the string to pick it up on is, what are the needs of families and how can we address them? Another thing we're trying to do at the village is look at our community planning and create clusters that are family friendly. So the people that live in them would be mainly family people or people that really want to be around children. So it is like, oh, get those noisy kids out of here. But to create family friendly environments, to make sure that we're also about to appoint someone to be a family leader, to coordinator, to really work with each of the families. What are your needs? What would you like to do? What can we do to help you? Maybe one family is having a problem with one of their children. How can the other family support them? So to make sure they're not isolated. That's what happens with families all too often. They can become isolated because they're just too tired from the daily demands to reach out and make those connections. And so to make sure we are reaching out. So in fact, we're going to meet with someone later today and talk with her about, would you like to be the family coordinator? And she's already mentioned that she's interested, so I don't think it's a hard sell. But so those are a few things, but just to create environments and time that the children do not feel like an imposition on the greater community, but are welcomed and embraced, and then also to have someone working with the families to make sure that we're hearing what the needs are.
We have a 10-year plan that includes planning, housing, jobs, clusters, but we want within 10 years for Ananda Village to be the best environment possible for families to be here and to raise their children, especially if they're devotees. And I would say that it would be very healthy for your community as it develops to have that same goal that within 10 years, because it's complex to get everything together, including jobs and income. But within 10 years, to have the best possible environment for people to raise their children in the healthiest, most integrated and spiritually uplifting way. You have to start some of these things. It takes time to get certain initiatives started, to get certain things. For instance, Devi mentioned clustering the housing together. Well, maybe it means some people moving from where they are now so that families can live in association with each other, and so on. So it takes time, but the time to start that endeavor is now.
And you will make mistakes. We made mistakes over the years. It doesn't work very well for families to live in group houses. It's hard on the parents, it's hard on the children. But whereas, single people or couples without children, group houses work nicely. But again, that's why we speak of clusters, nearby houses where the children can run and play, maybe have a central play area. We, at the village in the family area, we put it up. It's not very fancy, but just one of those, a swimming pool, just, a movable one, but it's enough for all the children to go in. And again, it's saying and it's in the midst of where a lot of families live. So that, because we have a swimming pool at Crystal Hermitage, but it disrupts people when the children come. So let's give them their own. So other questions, because our time is running out.
So there is time for one more question. There is a question here. Go. And it's question from Karuna Devi.
Hello, Jyotish and Devi. I'm Karuna Devi. I'm from France and very happy to be back here in Ananda for the first time in 2 years. The last year and a half has been one of separation, but also greater unity than ever. We're so grateful for those of us who are not here in Ananda, all the efforts the community have made for these satsangs like this one. And I was wondering, what are your thoughts about the evolution of our community now that we have these online opportunities? And how do you see the evolution? What gives you hope? And do you have any guidance for us? For example, in France, we have a new Francophone group. It wouldn't have been possible without all of this. But yeah, any hopes, guidance from you? Thank you.
Well, thank you. How nice to hear from you. I wish we could be there to greet you. I think that certain things have happened during the time of the pandemic. One of them being that we are now much more connected because of the connections on the internet than we ever have been before. Ananda has grown in terms of the numbers of people connected to us. Many places are at least 50% bigger than what they have been before. I think the future is never going to look like it was 5 years ago, where the only offerings we had were where you had to come in person to receive those offerings. I think the age of electronic connection is upon us, and we will use that. What I see is a fusion of different ways of connecting with people, because that's what we're really talking about. How can we feel connected? How can people receive these teachings? How can they feel inspired? How can we know different people's needs and so on? I think it will not from now on be a fusion of doing that electronically. Some of it will be just what we're doing now. Some of it will be individual talks or small groups. Plus, as things open up, of course, there's nothing that ever quite substitutes for being together in person. It's much richer and more fulfilling for that to happen. But I think we will have both, and we have to keep expanding. And the final thing I'll say is the Ananda as a whole has to network together more, because there will be certain areas, just as right now, India in the last month was under a great deal of pressure. And so we responded to that by taking up a donation, and we've sent $60,000 to India in order to help them through this difficult time. But that's the kind of networking that we're going to need to do. So not as much isolation. So don't think of a CC just as a CC. It's all of Europe. And don't think of Europe just as Europe. It's part of the Ananda network. And let's all work together.
Yeah, it's really, the future is not easy to see for mere mortals as we are, but the masters see it very clearly, and they see the steps that will happen inevitably to bring us forward. But I think one of the gifts of the pandemic is to realize how we can connect globally and effectively, to share in satsang and to share in masters vibration, not just teachings, but vibration. And I think, for example, right now we have, and I think you have it at Assisi too, we have a virtual community, and there are almost 300 people that are active members. So it's our largest community in the world, is the virtual community. And there are people from many different countries who are a part of it. And that's helping them where they are. But we're seeing also the movement in members of that virtual community to want to start little centers in their area. And so it will be, it will draw more and more people, the magnetism of that sharing will draw more and more people. And just in the last month, we've talked to people from, India, Russia, several places in the United States that want to start communities. And even though they're not quite ready as far as having a group that's ready to go, you can feel the momentum of that movement. And so it's not easy to predict the future, but if we just take each day, make the best decisions we can, ask Master what is trying to happen to help bring hope for a better world. And just to close, I want to say one thing, and then Jyotish can close as well. The concert that all of you in Assisi put on for India, they are still talking about that. That had such a tremendous upliftment and positive impact on them. So thank you for them for putting out all that beautiful energy and music to bring upliftment to our brothers and sisters in India.
The music itself was very uplifting and touching, but what touched them most was the caring that you all showed by doing that. And that's just the kind of thing that we need to be doing. I'm going to very quickly answer one more question, a balance between planning time and practical time. You need a long-term plan only enough to set a direction. If you're wandering, just pick a peak and you know that that's the direction you want to go in. But then the planning ought to be 6 months at a time. What do we need to do now and in the next 6 months, as long as it's in alignment with that long-term direction?
We were talking with someone yesterday who's working on a new project and keeps planning and planning. And we said, planning can become a way of life. You need to start doing it now.
Yes. So I think we don't have a lot more to say. Love each other, love God, practice the techniques of our path that will bring you in attunement with God, and then bring that consciousness into your daily life as much as you can. And it's a little day by day, step by step process, but it will transform you and transform the world around you when all of us do that.
Special greetings to Rosanna, to Ashtara, Nandini, and Ramanand, and to all of you.
God bless you all.
Thank you, Jyotish. Thank you, Devi. It's always a great joy and always a great blessing to have you with us, whether it's digital or whether it's in person, and hope to see you very soon, in both ways.
Bye-bye. Goodbye. Thank you.